So good morning, students. Today we're going to go over the Lewis and Clark expedition. You could follow along with your textbooks. This is going to be page 298 to 307, but this video will also be going over the reading. I'm also uploading a picture of these pages online if you need them for later, or you could also review the video once again when you're doing your assignment. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to read these pages and then I'll explain the assignment. So let's begin. So if we turn to page 299, we see that in 1803, Thomas Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to find the route to the Pacific and explore the uncharted West. Uncharted means that it has never been put in a map, so they didn't know what was out there. Let's continue. Jefferson believed woolly mammoths, erupting volcanoes, and a mountain of pure salt awaited them. When they found was no less mind-boggling. Some 300 species of unknown to science, nearly 50 Indian tribes, and the Rocky Mountains. This tells you that there were a lot of misconceptions of what was out there. They fully didn't quite know what they would find. But regardless, the fact is that they did discover a lot of new species and a lot of different tribes. Let's continue. Lewis was Jefferson's private secretary and an Army officer, and an enthusiastic amateur scientist. Clark was a friend of Lewis and also an Army officer. On May 14, 1908, the two men set off to camp near St. Louis, Missouri, accompanied by a group of about 40 men that they dubbed the Corps of Discovery. That was their name. Most of the explorers were soldiers, and one was Clark's African-American slave, a man named York. Packed into 3 boats along with their supplies, the men headed upstream on the Missouri River towards the region that now have familiar names such as Kansas, North Dakota, Idaho. In 1804, this area was called the Louisiana Territory. As far as Jefferson was concerned, it was the great unknown. Okay, so some important facts here is that Lewis was Jefferson's private secretary. So obviously, Jefferson sending someone that he truly trusts. The fact that he was his secretary is probably that he was pretty good with details. So it was a good person to send in that regards. Also, Clark was a friend of Lewis. So Lewis is taking someone he feels comfortable with. And they were both Army officers. So that helps because they probably had some survival training. And when we read further down, we discover that all 40 men had been soldiers. So they're not taking just anyone. They're trying to, they don't know what's out there. So they're trying to take some of the most prepared men that they knew. And the fact that they were soldiers gives them a better chance of survival than just a common person. Okay, let's turn to page 300. Fort Mandan and beyond. One of Jefferson's goals for the expedition was to establish friendly relationships with the Indian tribes living in the West. Lewis and Clark had a mixed success with this effort. Some tribes welcomed the explorer with gifts and an offer of alliance, while others were either uninterested or hostile. The Mandan living in the present-day North Dakota were among the more welcoming groups. The corps arrived at the village of the Mandan in Hidatsa in October 1804. After being warmly received, Lewis and Clark decided to build their winter quarters nearby. So if you notice, I highlighted this section and because this is one of the main reasons. So the one reason is, yes, Jefferson wants to know what's out there, but that's not his only purpose for this expedition. The other expedition is the fact that he wants to start to create friendly relationships with the Indians. Now, if you remember from first semester, we discovered that one of the reasons that King George III wanted to maintain peaceful relations with the natives is because they were the #1 people in providing furs for them. And during this time, fur is still a very a good commodity that makes the country a lot of money. During this time, it's still the same, and Jefferson wants to keep good relations. Plus, they know the land better than anybody else. So if they're gonna eventually expand and send people there, it's good that the Native Americans are in their side and they're not fighting with the white people that are going to be moving to their land. Let's continue. While building their camp, the explorers met Sacagawea. I always mispronounce your names, guys, so sorry if I did it. If you guys can pronounce it better, good for you. Sacagawea would become an important member of the Corps of Discovery. She was a young woman of the Shoshone tribe, which lived just east of the Rocky Mountains. She had been kidnapped from her people as a small child and was now married to a French-Canadian trader named Toussaint Charbonneau. Knowing they would meet the Shoshone later in their travels, Lewis and Clark hired Sacagawea and Charbonneau as interpreters. So she's going to be extremely helpful. The fact that she's a Native American, when they meet other Native Americans, they feel a little bit more secure. And she probably knew a lot of the dialects that were being used. So they're going to hire her and her husband, the French-Canadian trader, to guide them in this expedition. And you're going to find out that in a couple times, actually, I don't know if it's mentioned in this chapter, they actually do help almost to save their lives. The fact that she's there with them. Also, she's the only woman, it's not mentioned here, but she's the only woman in this expedition. She's completely surrounded by men. In April 1805, the Corps Discovery broke camp and resumed its journey west. At the same time, they sent a boat back to Thomas Jefferson in Washington, D.C., loaded with 108 botanical specimens, 68 mineral specimens, and a map of the United States drawn by William Clark. So what's important about this is that throughout their travels, when they're able to, they're sending back updates to the president. So this is very important. If you're the leader and you're sending someone to explore things to you, you want them to keep you posted and know what they're doing. So as you can see, they already had a lot of new things that they were discovering, and they're letting the president know. I want us to turn and I want you to look at the shopping list that they have here. This is a shopping list of items that they purchased for their trip. They knew that they were going to be out. They didn't know how long. They didn't know if they were coming back. But this is some of the items that they bought. And it says here that in today's time, they probably spent what amounts to $40,000 in 2016, and probably be a little bit more now that we're in 2020. So their cost was $2,324, but in today's time, it would be over $40,000. Okay, so I want you to look at this because on your assignment, you're going to create your own list of what you would take. And maybe if you guys can add the prices, that would be great. So they're going to take camping equipment, okay? Tents, hatchets, it's like to cut things down. So let me see, 105 pounds of fishing hooks. That's a lot of fishing hooks. So they knew that one of probably their main staple for meat would be fish. 12 pounds of soap. Okay. Maybe they should have taken more soap so they wouldn't smell. Not just kidding. 193 pounds of portable soup. Interesting. I wonder if that was like the new type of cans that they were producing in those days. Not sure. All right, medicine. That's important. They took medicine like so a dozen of Rushi Thunder Clapper pills. Okay. Syringes, tourniquets, and doses of sweat inducer. Interesting. Okay. Gifts for the Native American tribes: 12 dozen pocket mirrors, 4,600 sewing needles, 8 brass kettles, and 20 pounds of beads, 288 brass thimbles. So sewing is going to be one of the areas that obviously they know that the Native Americans are interested in, and that's what they're going to provide for them. So and mirrors, I guess, for vanity reasons. So later on, your assignment will include that you create your own list. What would you take? You probably wouldn't be taking these same things that they're taking. What would you take? You're going to create a list for that in your assignment. Okay, let's continue reading. Let's go to page 301. So, from the Rockies to the Pacific, throughout the summer, the corps made progress towards the Rocky Mountains, nervously watching as the imposing snow-capped peaks grew taller and taller as they approached. When they reached the region we now call northern Montana, Lewis scouted ahead of the expedition and came across the grandest sight I ever beheld. The Great Falls of the Missouri, along with 4 additional waterfalls immediately upriver. The expedition had no choice but to portage, which means to carry their canoes, overland for 18.5 miles in order to get around the falls. Extreme summer heat, dangerous storms, prickly pears, cacti, and a brush made the portage more challenging and time consuming and anticipated, and the journey took nearly a month. So having to carry the expedition is hard in itself. They're going to rocky mountainous terrain, but now they have to carry their canoes, so that made it really, really hard. And here it says that they have prickly pear, so that's nopales. For those of you that don't know what a prickly pear cacti is, they're nopales. So they're crossing these areas. They have a lot of them, so you could see how that can be problematic when you're carrying a canoe. They might have something that's really heavy and might be covering part of your sight. In August, the corps reached the Shoshone village, just east of the mountains. Here they hoped to buy horses to help them cross the mountains. The next thing that happened could be described as one of history's most stunning coincidences. The Shoshone villagers recognized the Juija, to everyone's shock and delight. She learned that the chief of the group was her long lost brother. So this was really helpful. And like I said before, she actually helps them in other occasions too. But obviously this is going to help them with providing them with horses. So the fact that the head chief is her brother is a very good news for the corpse. Okay, let's continue. Page 302, I want us to note the stuff that they have here, some of their discoveries. So I wanted you to go ahead and check it out. So previously unknown plants, they describe 178 plants. So in this part of the land that they're traveling, that's a good number of plants that they didn't know about before. 122 previously unknown animals, and 48 tribes encountered. Some of them they knew about, but I mean, the fact that they saw 48 tribes, it just shows you that there was still a lot of Native American population in the area. This is important because as we continue to spread, a lot of those tribes will be pushed elsewhere, and we'll learn about that later. Throughout this journey, there was only one casualty, okay? And he died of natural causes. Even though they are going to have some conflicts with the Native Americans, the one person that actually dies probably had nothing to do with that. So that is important to know, because you're going to see later on that most of the people weren't expecting them to return. So the journey spanned over 8,000 miles and went on for 863 days. That's a very, very long time. Okay, so let's continue. A joyful arrival. At the end of August, the expedition set out to cross the Rockies with 29 horses they had purchased. The crossing was brutal. At one point, the men lost the trail in the midst of the blinding snowstorm. By the time they stumbled out of the mountains, the men in Sacagawea were exhausted and almost frozen and near starvation. Happily, for the corpse, the Nez Purse Indians who lived in the west side of the Rockies were welcoming and willing to share their food. So here it shows you some of the dangers of their expedition. And a lot of the time, it's not going to be always the Native Americans, it's going to be the terrain. So heavy mountains, I mean, mountains having to carry your canoes, and in this particular case, a blinding snowstorm. So going through all of that, just having to travel the amount of time that they had to travel was exhausting. The fact that they have to do it through a blinding snowstorm makes it even worse. So I underlined obviously some key words. They were definitely going to be exhausted, feeling almost frozen, and probably near starvation because how they can't really cook much of the stuff that they have with them when there's a blinding snowstorm at foot. So let's continue. Soon the explorers were on their last leg of their westward journey, making their way down to the swift-flowing Columbia River towards the Pacific Ocean. On November 7th, Clark wrote on his journal, "Ocean view, oh, the joy." In fact, the corps had just reached the place where the Columbian widened before meeting the Pacific. The men were still 20 miles from the coast. 3 weeks later, after battling fierce storms, the expedition finally reached the shore of the Pacific. So as you can see, 20 miles, in our cars today, we do it really quickly. It took them 3 weeks because of the storms and all the things they had to deal with. With winter approaching, the corps built a settlement they named Fort Clatsop after the Indian living nearby. Lewis and Clark hoped to avoid recrossing the Rockies and return the trip east. American and British trading ships often stopped near the mouth of the Columbia, and the plan was to take passage on one of these ships. However, the expedition never stopped a single ship during a long and dreary winter and had only 12 days without rain. So the part, I guess, of the west coast that they reached was a little bit northern from where we're at. Our climate is much better, but on the location they were at, it was raining a lot. So they were hoping to be able to see a ship and then for them to take a voyage on the ship so that they wouldn't have to go through the difficulties that they had before, but they were not successful in that. So they end up coming back by land. Okay, so homeward bound. When spring finally arrived, the expedition was more than ready to leave Fort Clatsop. The trip back to the St. Louis was difficult and filled with dangers. The corps failed in its first attempt to cross the Rockies and had to try the second time. Before leaving the mountains, the expedition split into two to explore more territory, and both groups had hostile encounters with the Native American groups. Lewis experienced a dramatic event when he got shot in the leg. The shot, however, was likely by accident from someone in his group. That's because the natives didn't have guns. Luckily, it did not result in an injury that was life-threatening. Soon afterwards, the two halves of the expedition were reunited. On September 23, the corps of Discovery came ashore in St. Louis nearly 2.5 years after their departure. The entire city turned out to celebrate the return of the heroes who had been given up for dead. So, like I said earlier, many of the people thought that they weren't going to survive. So, when it had been a couple years, they assumed that they had been killed by natives or something. So, unlike many earlier explorers, Lewis and Clark did not set off in search of gold or monetary rewards. So if you can see, it's true. Remember we had talked about the 3 Gs, glory, God, and gold. They didn't go for those reasons. Instead, they were returning, like it says here, for far richer treasure, knowledge about the people, places, plants, and animals, the lands far west of the Mississippi. So this is the first exploration that has nothing to do with the 3 Gs that the explorers before did. So here we have a little information on Sacagawea. She was kidnapped at the age of 12 by the Hidatsa. Sacagawea Shoshone was taken from the Rocky Mountains to the Hidatsa Mandan villages in North Dakota. there where she met the corpse of discovery in November 1804. Sacagawea's knowledge of languages and the land proved to be very valuable to the corpse as they moved west, passing through the territories of many Native American tribes, some of which had never seen a white man before. When these tribes saw Sacagawea and her baby, so look, she even had her baby with her, traveling with the corpse, they knew the corpse was friendly group, disinterested in war. The statue of Sacagawea just stands in a park in Portland, Oregon. So once again, this just shows you how she was beneficial to the group. Not only was there a woman there, they made things easier. Yeah, women. Woo. Not only that, but obviously she knew many languages, and she pretty much saved their behinds a couple times. Okay, so let's continue. We're almost done, guys. So here we have page 304, an entry of a journal. And I'm showing you this because this is a little treasure that they find. Obviously, you're seeing that in his journal, he's pretty much mapping what he is seeing and what he's doing. So let's see what it says here. Among the treasures to emerge from the corpse, the discovery of the journals of Lewis and Clark, and that men described in details the geography of the West, as well as the people, plants, and animals they encountered. They also narrated a thrilling tale of exploration and adventure. Some have described the journal as our national poem. So I'm marking this because that's also one of the parts of your assignment. I'm going to want you to do pretend you're with them, that you're part of that corpse, and you're actually going to write a journal entry for that. Okay, so you're going to have to pretend you're part of their group and create a journal entry. So you're going to need to use the knowledge of what we've talked about and your imagination to do that. And then let's move to page 305. And again, these are just other examples of what they did on their journal. Because we're doing this electronically, you won't be able to draw anything. But if you want to, you could insert a picture of some of the animals in that territory if you want. It's up to you. The last item here, primary source, you're going to have to analyze this for your homework also. It's part of the assignment. So let's read it real quick. The Indian woman recognized the country and assures us that this is the river of which her relations, the Shoshone, live, and that Three Forks are not, and that the Three Forks are no great distance. This piece of information has shared the spirits of the party, who now begin to console themselves with the anticipation of shortly seeing the head of the Missouri, yet unknown to the civilized world. So you're going to have to read this again and then explain why are they happy? Why do they get so happy about this? Okay, so once again, so this is our little video for today, just narrating the chapter that you need to read. I will also include those pages, pictures of those pages for those of you who are not able to take your books home. And the assignment. So the assignment has 3 parts to it, like I mentioned earlier. The first part is you're gonna create a list, a shopping list of what you would take on the expedition if you were with them, and you could use items of today, not on the past. Second thing you're gonna do is you're gonna create a journal entry, pretending you're part of the corpse. And the third item that you're gonna do is analyze this primary source. Read it again and explain to me why they're happy about the news. Okay, so see you guys soon in one of our conferences. I will hopefully be able to explain further. If you have any questions, you could also message me. Okay, have a great day, guys. Bye.